was absolutely insane.
Molly has it dialed. She is so sure of herself.
The surf brands you grew up on, they don't speak for surfers anymore. Quiksilver, Billabong, Hurley, Volcom, once born in salt and stitched in rebellion, now barcodes in a corporate portfolio. They sold your lineup to Wall Street, and most of us didn't even flinch. The shops disappeared, the teams were cut, and the gear, just logos on lifeless racks. This isn't some wistful throwback. It's what happens when culture gets cashed out, when soul becomes stock. So how did we get here? And more importantly, who's bringing it back? Because somewhere out there, the spark still burns. Before surfing became an industry, it was just a way of life. No boards made overseas, no sales targets, just waves, wax, and the hunt for something better. And that's exactly how the first real surf brand started. Gordon Merchant shaped boards in his backyard and stitched his own board shorts. He sold them under the name Billabong, right from the Gold Coast.
I was building boards on the Gold Coast, still building boards during this period because Billabong hadn't really got off the ground, or it was still subsidising our income through me building surfboards. And I had a sander that was working for me, and I was trying to come up with a name, and I said, look, I want something Australian. And he said, well, why don't you just call it Billabong? I went, okay.
And that was it.
That was it.
Bob McKnight and Jeff Hackman took the blueprint from Quiksilver Australia and launched it in the US, selling trunks out of the back of a car. In California,
so Jeff convinced me to, let's do this Quiksilver project, that'll be a project. And so everything I learned at SC, I didn't apply any of it to this thing. I never built a business plan. I never did a marketing plan. I never went through the 5 Ps. We didn't do anything. My thing was to let's just do this short thing, sell them up and down the coast, out of the back of my car, hang out with Jeff Hackman, surf all the great spots, meet a bunch of great people, and then I'll go to film school, or go to the graduate school, excuse me. So anyway, we started Quiksilver 1976. I was 21 years old, was fresh out of college, and it's just been an amazing run.
Michael Thompson and Joel Cooper created Gotcha, a brand that felt like punk rock had collided with a beach bonfire. They weren't building companies, they were building culture.
Tom, and I said to Michael, honestly, you the man. Everybody knows you. You're going to have to promote this. Nobody knows Quiksilver. We can't afford to pay 2 people. Why don't we do it ourselves? Which we agreed to. And then the story I was telling you a little earlier is how we came up with the name, is that Michael used to write down things that he would find interesting, regardless of what is in the book. It was like his black book. And once we had to come up with a name, he said, you know what, for years I've been accumulating all these names, which we honestly use many of those names in our lines in the future. And he wrote down 10 on a piece of paper. He said, circle the one that you like, and I'll do the same. And there was no question. Gotcha was the name.
Add in Rip Curl, started in a shed in Torquay by 2 surfers who just wanted better gear. Or Volcom, launched in the 90s by Richard Wolcott and Tucker Hall after a snowboarding trip lit a fuse. It was one of the first brands to embrace surf, skate, and snow under one flag. It wasn't safe. It was chaotic, creative, and real. These brands didn't follow trends. They set them. They ran on feel, not spreadsheets. Graphics were loud, ads were weird, and products were built because they wanted to use them, not because a retailer asked for it. And everything was rooted in the community. Local surf shops weren't just retail, they were lifelines. Hangouts, bulletin boards for the next swell, free stickers on the counter, Grom contest in the parking lot, pros showing up unannounced in vans with half their team stuffed in the back and boxes of gear up front. Team riders weren't just athletes, they were family. Some stayed loyal for years, even decades. Not because the check was huge, but because the brand felt like home. The older guys passed down wisdom, the young guys carried it forward.
JB2, 10 years old, so tell me, how long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing this like my whole life. My first surf contest was the Coastal Edge ECSE, which is awesome because this is what we're at right now.
And when you wore one of those logos, it meant something. That you surfed, that you belonged, that you got it. Before the names were bought, before the image was licensed, these brands were a signal. and everyone inside the lineup knew. Outsiders would never understand it. That's what made it real, and it's what made it worth losing. Back then, you didn't need algorithms to go viral. You just needed a VHS camera, a van full of surfers, and a garage to cut the footage in. Early surf edits weren't content, they were legend. Passed hand to hand, replayed until the tape wore thin. Photos ran in zines or Inside Surfer and Transworld, not ad campaigns. The goal wasn't reach, it was respect. The writers didn't just promote the brand, they helped shape it. Logos, slogans, product ideas, they all came from inside the crew. If something looked off, the team called it out. Everyone had a say. It was messy, it was tribal, but it was real. And if you weren't part of it, you didn't fake it. You didn't just wear the gear, you had to earn it. That exclusivity, that gatekeeping, it wasn't about ego, it was about protecting something pure. The lineup wasn't for everyone, and neither were the brands that came out of it. Because once the outsiders came knocking, the whole thing started to change. In the late 90s and early 2000s, surfing wasn't just a sport. It became a full-blown aesthetic. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of it. Hollywood jumped in with movies like Blue Crush, which raked in over $50 million and helped drag surf culture into the global spotlight. MTV, ESPN, and even Morning Talk shows aired contests and highlights. Kelly Slater wasn't just dominating the world tour, he was starring in video games, dating celebrities, and becoming the face of surf for people who'd never touched a board. Surf brands rode that momentum hard. Hurley sold to Nike in 2002. Volcom went public in 2005. Reef exploded across the US and Europe. Gotcha expanded rapidly in the 80s and 90s, but declined over time due to over-licensing and market shifts. What started in garages and beach towns had become a billion-dollar business, and investors wanted in. Even board builders got swept up. Channel Islands, founded by Al Merrick, became the most sought-after surfboard label on the planet. Curran, Machado, Slater, they all rode CIs. When Burton bought the brand in 2006, it marked a crossover moment. Snowboard industry meets surf shaping bay. With it came tech-driven board design, athlete endorsements, and global distribution models. Meanwhile, Lost Surfboards, founded by Matt Mayhem Biolos, embraced a rawer energy. Their boards were plastered with chaotic art, their edits were fast and rebellious, and they found fans in both Groms and grizzled lifers. Lost didn't just sell boards, they sold attitude. The look of surf hit everywhere. Kids who'd never seen an ocean were rocking Hurley hoodies at middle schools in Ohio. Red Bull started sponsoring surf athletes. Target logos popped up on contest jerseys. Suddenly, core riders shared podiums with energy drink reps. That meant more products, more stores, more everything. Board shorts turned into jeans, sandals, jackets, even cologne. Quiksilver sponsored concert tours. Billabong launched runway lines. Volcom showed up in Vogue. The logos were everywhere, but the soul behind them was fading. Even the surf tour wasn't immune. Events like the Quik Pro and Billabong Pro became branded spectacles. Surfers weren't just athletes, they were content. Edits felt more like ad campaigns than raw footage. Authenticity got buried beneath the branding. Local surf shops felt it first. Big box stores undercut them. Brands sold direct online. That board short you hunted down at your local shop? Now it sat in a clearance bin at the mall. Core surfers noticed. They weren't just losing gear, they were losing trust. The logos they once wore with pride started to feel empty. Too many drops, no identity, just noise. This was the turning point. Surfing didn't sell out all at once, but wave by wave, it was slipping away. The tide had shifted, and what was coming next would change everything. By the mid-2000s, the surf industry wasn't just booming, it was being bought. Quiksilver went public in 1998 and quickly acquired DC Shoes. Billabong followed with a brand buying spree. Von Zipper, Element, Sector 9, Nixon, all under one roof. Volcom sold to Kering, the luxury group behind Gucci. Even Rip Curl, once fiercely independent, was sold to Kathmandu Holdings in 2019, ending 50 years of surfer-led ownership. Electric Visual got folded in, then spun back out. Rusty sold off its clothing license. FCS, one of the most trusted names in surf hardware, was snapped up by Macquarie Capital. The tide was turning fast. Surfers were out. Suits were in. Private equity moved in like sharks. Oaktree Capital grabbed control of Billabong. Eventually, Billabong and Quiksilver were merged into Boardriders Inc, which in 2023 sold to Authentic Brands Group, better known for mall fashion than core surf culture. After that, it wasn't just consolidation, it was sterilization. Travel budgets got cut, surf teams were slashed, riders were handed product briefs instead of plane tickets. Creativity gave way to content calendars. The magic got managed. Inside HQ, it was no better. Lifers were replaced by brand managers who didn't surf. The clubhouse vibe turned corporate, and the people who actually lived the lifestyle were shown the door. Even the gear felt off. Board shorts got flimsier, tees fit weird, logos got louder, but emptier. Everything started blending together because it came from the same boardroom. And for the fans, it was heartbreaking. These weren't just brands, they were identities. Every sticker on a board, every hat, every pair of trunks, it meant something. Quiksilver was for the fearless. Billabong was for the wanderers. Volcom was for the rebels.
You know, Oakley had a moon base. Billabong was a little more subdued, but still kind of a fun atmosphere with vintage boards and stuff. Volcom was wild, and so on. And so that was kind of the physical manifestation of what the surf industry was.
They stood for who you were in the lineup and who you wanted to be. But the soul of surf didn't just fade, it got packaged, priced, and posted. Instead of style progression, we got brand synergy. Instead of underground edits, we got pre-roll ads. The weirdos and wave chasers who once shaped the culture were ghosted in favor of polished influencers and product drops. What was once a creative frontier started feeling like a fashion aisle. It was like watching your favorite band trade a warehouse show for a TikTok brand deal. What started as a movement was morphing into a merchandise line, and the people who built it barely recognized it. But the real unraveling? That was just around the corner. The surf boom built castles on sand, and then the tide came in. Between 2008 and 2010, global economies collapsed.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
Surf gear wasn't essential, and the fallout came fast. International distributors vanished. Wholesale orders dried up. Surf shops that once ran on pre-orders and handshake deals were now fielding calls about unpaid invoices and canceled shipments. Growth had been propped up by credit and hype. Now both were gone. The financial crash didn't just slow the industry down, it exposed how fragile it really was. Jack's Surfboards and WRV, two of the most respected core shops in the US, tightened their budgets, slashed event support, and watched longtime brand partners chase mall margins. Meanwhile, chains like PacSun, who had been cashing in on surf style without ever living it, saw their sales tank. Surf gear turned into clearance rack filler, and the line between authentic and artificial blurred almost overnight. Globally, the collapse hit just as hard. In Australia, surf HQs went quiet. In Hossegor, France, once Europe's epicenter for surf brands, shops shuttered and surf events dried up. Brazil's scene, which had been exploding with talent, lost international support almost overnight. Tour stops were slashed. Local economies shrank. The ripple effects weren't regional. They were everywhere. What got hit hardest wasn't just sales. It was the future. Mid-tier pros and junior team riders were dropped en masse. The QS became a ghost tour. Edits dried up. Photographers stopped getting calls.
I don't know where the money that is coming into surfing is necessarily going. I don't think it's going to the surfers. It might be going to the surf shops a little bit, but I think it's just kind of coming in and going out, you know?
A whole generation of would-be pros watched the ladder disappear. If you weren't already a star, there was nowhere left to climb. And then came the collapse of surf media itself. Surfing Magazine, Transworld Surf, Surfer, gone. These weren't just publications. They were the scaffolding of surf culture.
Transworld Surf Days, when magazines had budgets and were flown to Hawaii to cover events and blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah.
You know, one boat trip a year, one trip to Tavarua a year, seemingly endless budget back then.
Without them, there were no trip recaps, no deep dive rivalries, no sense of history being recorded. Photographers lost gigs, filmers lost budgets, editors left the space. Entire crews that shaped the culture were out of a job. YouTube and Instagram were rising, but the storytelling hadn't caught up. What replaced full-length edits and magazine features were scattered clips and surf vlogs. There was content, but no continuity. The scene got louder, but it lost its voice. Legacy brands were flailing. Gotcha vanished again. Channel Islands, once the high-performance standard, had been sold to Burton, only to be bought back by local owners trying to rebuild its soul. But most brands never got that second chance. Rusty was a shell of its former self. Electric Visual disappeared from surf lineups entirely. The rest traded hands like expired licenses. Quiksilver, Billabong, Volcom, Reef, once cultural cornerstones, were now rented out to retailers who didn't know a thing about tide charts or tail shapes. What disappeared wasn't just surf edits or logos on tees. It was the idea that any of it actually meant something. It was the entire support system that helped surfing grow from a fringe obsession into a global movement. When the infrastructure collapsed, so did the culture that held it together. The waves kept coming, but the world built around them was gone. When the soul drained from the industry, core surfers didn't just complain, they left. One of the most visible breakaways came from Dane Reynolds, Craig Anderson, and Austin Gillette. Instead of chasing brand checks, they launched Former, a stripped-back label built on creative control, raw edits, and total independence. No KPIs, no drop schedules, just surfing, skating, and doing things their way. Former wasn't a play for market share, it was a call to arms. John Florence followed suit. After Hurley was sold and gutted, he walked away and helped launch Florence Marine X, a performance-first brand that felt like a direct response to everything the big labels had lost. No fluff, no fake lifestyle marketing, just gear built for core surfers who still live in board shorts and wetsuits. Florence stayed loyal to his longtime shaper, John Pizell, and the two remained tightly linked, building gear from Hawaii for the kind of waves they actually surf. Pizell Surfboards doubled down on its identity. High-performance boards shaped with precision, not branding. While conglomerates were pumping out logo gear, Pizell was building boards for Pipeline. It stayed premium, trusted, and deeply respected among core surfers worldwide. No ad budgets, just quality. In Australia, Need Essentials took a totally different path. Ultra-functional wetsuits and surf basics with no branding, no hype, and no middlemen. Their tagline, "Everything you need, nothing you don't," hit home for surfers tired of paying for marketing campaigns. They found a strong base not just in Oz, but across Europe and the Americas. In an era obsessed with identity, they chose utility. And in Byron Bay in California, Banks Journal focused on clean design, sustainability, and staying connected to the community. Founded by surfers and creatives from both sides of the Pacific, they blended surf, art, and street culture without ever chasing trends. With artist collabs, minimalist cuts, and a commitment to slow growth, they kept it low-key and surf-driven. No noise, just style and substance. Together, these brands didn't just sell product. They relit the flame. They weren't trying to be the next Quik or Billabong. They were trying to remind everyone why we cared in the first place. They showed that you didn't need investors to make gear that mattered. You needed vision, values, and a refusal to sell out. And for core surfers sick of mall brands and marketing decks, it wasn't just refreshing. It felt like coming home. This wasn't nostalgia. It was a new blueprint for how surfing could take its soul back. Before the boardroom took over, surf content wasn't about drop schedules or influencer deals. It was about feeling. A single Bruce Irons clip could define your whole season. A Pennywise track blasting over a raw Indo section? That stuck with you for life. Edits like What's Really Going Wrong by Lost weren't just chaotic, they were cultural markers. DIY filmmaking, $1,000 cameras, beer-soaked edits cut in beach shacks. No scripts, no marketing briefs, just stoke and rebellion. Then everything got clean. Post-2015, even the gnarliest brands polished up. Volcom's punk grit gave way to runway style. Billabong went from rough cuts of Parco and Andy Irons to studio-lit lookbooks. What once felt unpredictable now felt processed. Safe, focus-grouped. And that spirit, the raw, imperfect soul of surf culture, started to vanish. You felt it most in the soundtracks. There was a time when one song could brand a clip into your memory. Black Sabbath, Pennywise, The Clash. Now, Pre-cleared, royalty-free tracks that fade into algorithmic noise. We used to flip through Surfer and Transworld to see who was pushing the limits. Now, they're gone. Surfer, Surfing Magazine, Transworld Surf. They weren't just publications, they were Bibles. Every ad felt like street art, full-page chaos from Dane Reynolds or Ozzie Wright, covers that made you sprint to the break. When those mags folded, surf storytelling lost its backbone. There were no more editorials that captured the underground, no more photo spreads that made your jaw drop. Even the filmmakers took a hit. Kai Neville's Modern Collective, Joe G's Castles in the Sky, Thomas Campbell's Sprout, these weren't just films. They were roadmaps for style, movement, and energy. But when the mags disappeared and the brands stopped funding trips, long-form edits became an endangered species. Most of what followed was filler, cut-up clips, soulless transitions, and audio pulled from stock libraries. There were exceptions. Kai never stopped pushing the craft, dropping projects like Cluster and Vacuum that felt more like surf cinema than product pushes. But they were rare. The new normal? Quick hits for quick clicks. Globally, the scene dimmed. In Australia, South Africa, and Brazil, indie crews stopped traveling. Euro edits dried up. Even Hossegor and Florianopolis, once buzzing with creativity, felt silent. There were still waves, still surfers, but no one was telling the stories anymore. We didn't just lose edits, we lost the soundtrack, the narrative, the edge. And with it, a massive chunk of what made surf culture feel dangerous, soulful, and alive. In its place, feed-friendly perfection, slick, inoffensive, and forgettable. The collapse of surf's mega brands and magazines didn't just leave a hole, it created space. And from that space, a new generation is rising. Not waiting for permission, not asking for sponsors, just doing it themselves. Across the globe, DIY surf culture is taking root again. In Byron Bay, young shapers are glassing boards in backyard sheds. In San Diego, underground filmmakers are stitching together lo-fi edits with handhelds and cassette soundtracks. In Hossegor and Florianopolis, local surf shops are hosting movie nights and drop parties. Torquay is seeing a revival in retro boards and crew edits. Even in Portugal and South Africa, underground scenes are turning raw clips into viral moments. The energy feels raw again, unfiltered, personal, and actually fun. Grassroots innovation is everywhere. Surfers aren't waiting for the next Quik or Billabong, they're starting something new. Album Surfboards is hand-shaping ASIM boards in SoCal. Chaos Surf Club is printing zines out of New Zealand. Rage is dropping underground projects straight from Western Australia. Groms are filming their own edits, stitching together GoPro clips with punk tracks and no regard for what's marketable. And the internet? It's not killing surf, it's giving it oxygen. YouTube has become the new surfer magazine. Edits like Snapped 4 and Stab in the Dark don't just get views, they create conversation. Sonic souvenirs drop like an art film, not a product push. Even Instagram Reels, raw and imperfect, are breathing life into surf creativity. For every algorithm-choked feed, there's a weird clip going viral for all the right reasons. Fashion, music, and art are bleeding back in too, but not from glossy catalogs. Independent surfers are making capsule lines, collaborating with local artists, and premiering films in bars or galleries instead of press junkets. You'll see hand-painted wetsuits, board bags sewn from old sails, fins shaped by tattooers. It's chaotic, inconsistent, and alive. And the faces leading this shift aren't the polished pros of yesterday. Surfers like Harry Bryant, Mason Ho, and Coco Ho are magnetic not because of their win columns, but because of their style, humor, and raw energy. The new wave includes younger women and youth creators, pushing their own voice through independent edits and self-funded projects. The new surf identity doesn't care about rankings, it cares about originality. Single fin sliders, slab chasers, soft top partiers, they all belong. The gatekeepers are gone and no one's asking for validation. They're building something weird and wonderful, and the fans are following. Still, it's a fork in the road. Either this underground momentum grows into something real, or it gets swallowed again by licensing deals and algorithms. The difference now? The power doesn't sit in a boardroom. It's in the hands of surfers, shapers, and the communities that still care. The soul of surfing was never in the logos. It was in the people who refused to let it fade. And now, they're building something better. If you're fired up on this story, check out our deep dive into the rise and fall of the brands that built action sports culture in the first place. You won't see them the same way again. What do you think? Are we headed for a real surf renaissance? Or will the same mistakes repeat again? Thanks for watching and stay wicked.